important thing that we would like you to know after you leave today are what's the Rotary Foundation? Hopefully y'all have a grasp on that, but why is it a great 501c3? How is the Rotary Foundation funded? How do districts and clubs use the foundation? What's required? What's an MOU, a CPG, and a bunch of other alphabet soup like APF, TRF, ERFC? Where do you find the forms to apply? Yeah, I'll also tell you where to find it. We're fairly original, but not so terribly. What are the different types of grants that you can do? Where do you find the forms? Where do you find the amount shown as available for your CPG? And what if your fund doesn't use all the funds available? Are there reports due and when are they due? And finally, what does all this stuff really do? So let's do a little quick club history. Y'all know in 1905, Paul Harris started what we're all enjoying today. 1910, Arch Clump became one of the founders of the Rotary Club of Cleveland, Ohio. 1913, Clump went on to be president of that Rotary Club of Cleveland. And in 1916 was elected as president of Rotary International. During his time as president, he conceived of the idea of the foundation, but what he called it was the Rotary Endowment. In 1928, the Rotary Endowment was formally changed to the Rotary Foundation. And today, the Art Department Society, recognizing what he originally had done, recognizes the highest tier of donors, $250,000 and above. So, in our foundation, we've got various things that we do with regard to contribution. And I was sitting next to PDG Shirley Griffin, and Shirley has been extremely helpful from the standpoint of the district and getting in funds for polio. I believe you're now close to $1 million, is that correct? So each one of us contributes substantially as we come in. Polio is one of the things that comes into the foundation. But it's important to remember, by doing all this stuff, what we're supporting. We're bringing peace building to 200 teachers and 1,300 students in Guatemala and Uganda. We're distributing insecticide-treated mosquito nets and medical services to prevent malaria in Mali. We're training teachers who are established in an early childhood education center in South Africa. We're providing water filters, toilet blocks, and hygiene training to prevent fluorosis in the community in India. Finding scholarship for medical professionals to research ways to minimize mortality rates among premature babies. And that's in Italy, but it's also happening in Guatemala. And we're protecting children around the world from polio. So the funds that we were talking about a second ago, and we didn't really specifically mention those, but y'all have probably seen them. And we've talked about them in the foundation bank. These are coming in, and they can go into any one of a number of different spots. They can go into the annual fund, to the endowment fund, or to a specific restricted fund. Most of our talk today is going to be centered on the annual fund. Because as we deal with the annual fund, the money that comes into the annual fund, and that's usually shown as annual program fund or annual fund share when you're signing up for it. We use only the income for 3 years, and that's for the administration. Then it comes down, and half of it goes to the World Fund, half of it goes to district designated fund. On your table, you have a sheet that looks a little bit like this, and what it talks about is The District 5830 Foundation, well, it says at the top, Foundation Committee Manual, 2023-2024 maximum club program grant request amount. So the CPG request amount. It lists the name of your club. It'll talk about maximum CPG that you can request this year. It'll talk about the share contribution report. This also is available on Club Run, and we'll get you to there in just a little bit. But what happens is, as the money comes in and it's totaled up by your club, it goes into this pot that you see on the screen. Half of what your club donated then in 3 years comes back to the district. So if you were Athens, for example, you donated some 10,000, 5,000 came back as the share contribution report, and then 1,267, which is half of that 5,000, should be, comes back to you and your club. So the club actually, we've talked for years about we get to use 50% of it, and that's true, district-wide. But if we're talking club-wide on the CPGs, we're really talking 25% of what goes in. The district controls district grants and global grants that are matching. The other is controlled by the Rotary Foundation with regard to global grants and package grants. Then we have restricted funds. Those deal with Polio Plus partners, global grants, and specific areas of focus that you can designate. And then there's the endowment fund, which deals with Peak Scholars, global grants, and specific areas of focus. It's important to know, as we're sitting down and thinking about doing all the wonderful things we can do, that all this project funding happens by grants, either global grants or district grants. And global grants are 30,000 and up. So your club, if you enter into a global grant, you're probably going to want several clubs doing it, because you're going to have to come up with that $15,000 match for the 30,000. Global grants then generally deal with scholarships, local vocational training teams, international humanitarian projects, whereas district grants deal with club project grants, local humanitarian projects, international humanitarian projects, scholarships, and training or exchange teams, as we were talking about earlier. Reference material is found on all of them through Club Runner, through Rotary 5830 or page info resources. And if you were to reach on this, and I don't want to do it because we'll lose it, and click on it, it would bring you to a page from Club Runner. And you need to scroll down to about the second or third level. And it's going to have 3 columns. And at the top of that third column on the right side, you're going to have this sheet listing how much you can apply for. And it will also give you the other information regarding memorandum of agreement, the documentation guide, and the suggested bylaws and the checklist are all there on. You can also do this out, and I don't mean to sound disparaging with regard to RI's websites, but it can be a difficult dive if you're not doing it on a regular basis. John and I have done this, and John keeps saying, well, Jack, it's very simple. All you need to do, and bear in mind, I've been doing this 3 or 4 years now, through the district government track, and then getting into the foundation chair track. So you want to do this club project grant. You've got a park that needs to be enhanced. You want to do a splash pad. Or you found, as Terry Nike and the Longview Club did, a school in Guatemala that needs some help, and I believe it's a fence that was put up last year or so. You want to do that. You found somebody to work with you, to partner with you. What do you have to do? So your requirement, first off, you need to have training, what we're doing today. Then your DGE, your foundation chair have to sign the district MOU. Now, we do this periodically because we have to sign this MOU yearly. And y'all in the clubs do all of it. And then you've got to have the MOU terms implemented. Now, MOU is memorandum of understanding. Clubs have to do this also. You know, the president, foundation chair have to be trained. If generally want it done, that question was asked previously. It's also wise to come back and do a dive periodically, see if anything's changed. Presidents and foundation chair must sign the MOU. Assumptions have to be documented. When you're sending in the CPG, you're going to want to send in, you know, what you're doing. It asks for the breakout, you know, how you're going to perform all this stuff. You need to give us an idea as to if you're buying bicycles, where you're getting the bicycles from. You know, all of this is going to work, that the amounts match. And as with all things, the devil is in the detail. Club must be a tax exempt organization. What John was talking about with regard to filing those 990, gotta have it. You gotta be in good standing with the district and with RI. And dues have to be paid. You have to have made annual fund contributions for the last 3 years. And the term of the memorandum of understanding have to be implemented. So annually, Karen's gonna be signing one of these MOUs, I'm gonna be signing these MOUs, and the clubs who are, you know, the big folks we just talked about, the president and foundation chair are going to be signing the MOU. Now, grants are addressing specific areas. And you can read these various areas of focus. Y'all have probably dealt with them in your clubs already. It's important that we can specifically show how they impact one of these areas of focus. Most importantly, also, they need to be sustainable. We've had some wheelchair projects in the past. I know I had questions about one that was being done through Heart to Heart in Mexico. Not because it wasn't a good program, not because it didn't address areas of focus. The question was sustainability. The wheelchair breaks, who's going to fix the wheelchair? The bike breaks, who's going to fix the bike? You know, it's important when we reach out and we try to help people that we have either folks trained in place to do that if there is a problem, or that we are able, through what we have done, to set that up to where the things that we have done continue on. Of course, one of the things that you do is training local people, involving local people, training and exchange of information, and make sure that whatever you're doing is offering enduring value. So within our foundation, our district foundation committee, we have a grant subcommittee, and John Vetter is heading that up. We have district grant subcommittee, global grant subcommittee, and if you have a problem on this, y'all, don't get down don't dig down too much and get lost in the details. Call. We're here to help make this as easy as possible and help you navigate it. This ought to be a fun and rewarding experience. We're reaching out to somebody to make their lives better. And we're not trying to be the IRS auditors coming in and saying, hey guys, didn't quite do this right. We want to make sure that it works. Memorandum of understanding is for stewardship, financial management, document retention policy, and grant reporting responsibilities, as well as reporting misuse of funds. Let's start with that last one. Something that we never want to really talk about is embezzlement. We're Rotarians. This doesn't happen among Rotarians, but it can. And If and when it does, you need to have clear lines of reporting and responsibility. Now, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the new form for the bylaws actually sets that out. Is that not correct? Yeah. So if you have doubts as to whether your bylaws includes this, again, go to Club Room. It's got a form set of bylaws there. Download those, take a look at them, match them to your current bylaws. If y'all need a change, just change, not a problem. Follow the procedure to change options. But know what needs to be done and have the folks who are working on this know what needs to be done if something. The other things we're going to be talking about with regard to MOU is conflict of interest. Who's selling the bicycles? Who's selling the wheelchairs, for example? Leadership responsibility, financial management. There, and dovetailing with what John was talking about, we need a separate account. What comes through the foundation goes into a specific account. It needs to have dual signatures on it when anything comes out of it. And nothing but these funds go in that one account. Plan for an orderly transition with regard to custodians of those funds. Now, one of the wonderful things about Rotary is we have new leadership coming in every year. And one of the things that is a little troubling about Rotary is we have new leadership coming in every year. So ideally, we have everybody being trained as they're going along. So it doesn't end up, and I'm going to pick on Terry Dykey again, end up like Terry in the Longview Club a number of years ago. She'd come in when we had our president leave, and she'd not been in Rotary that long, and suddenly, surprise, she's president-elect, and she's moving into that room. You need to have something in place. And Terry came up with a great way to fix that, by the way, as many of y'all probably have. And that was with a council of presidents. G-string here just a minute ago, the governor's line. Okay, well, we also that year had a council of presidents. Anything was unusual, something that seemed to fit the regular trainings. We had a meeting. And we did this on a regular basis. So there are ways to fix this. And if you run into a problem, reach out to one. As Karen was pointing out, we're here to. We'll talk about this a little bit more in depth in a minute. But remember, we're trying to keep these documents for a while. Well, a while is 7 years. And they need to be kept in a place where you can access them 7 years. That might not be a good idea if it's just on the hard drive of the computer, because as you change various operating systems, that stuff can get lost. So just make sure that you're thinking about retaining documents along with financial reporting. And this is a document retention. It talks about identifying the storage site, original documents related to grants, copies of the latest IRS filing. A lot of that stuff we're going to need with your CPG and especially with your club project grant when you close it out. At the very end, we're going to want to know how much money was spent, the fact that it was all matched, and if there's any extra left over. If there is any extra left over, it needs to be returned in a check from that restricted account, both signatures on it, along with your closing document on the club project grant. We talked about bylaws a minute ago. It's scattered throughout. It's kind of added. But the easiest way to do this is to sit down as a club and develop your own policy manual on how you're going to do these grants. And it gives you an opportunity to interface with some new members, to train some new members with regard to that. to where you have a more seamless transition from year to year. If you have a foundation account, that's your club's foundation account. Okay, you should probably apply a lot of these same procedures with regard to this. But what we're specifically talking about here are restricted accounts, that you're going to have or set up at the time that you receive your maximum CPG request amount and that's documented under the CPG. Okay, now we're going to dive a little bit deeper here in a minute. But there was a question that came up on timing, when this stuff is due. We really need you to have already closed out your current CPG that was pending this past year, in Carolyn's year. If you haven't, now's the time to go. Make sure that you have the picture. If you gave away bicycle, get pictures of the kids on the bicycle. Hopefully you've already done that. You can attach that. You can attach the receipt from purchasing the bicycle. You can attach copies of the financial records from the accounts showing the money that came in, the money that was matched, where everything went. The reason why I said you should have already said it is because we tend to think, one step at a time. And the next step is for the next, and the club officers coming in. As a matter of fact, Jana has been in touch with us with regard to their new club project grant. With regard to the amounts that can be applied for, the form of the grant, and all of that's very important. But once we receive it, we really can't do anything until we've closed out the previous year's grant. So now's the time to be thinking about what y'all really want to do. Actually, past time. We would love to have everybody thinking about this 2 or 3 months out to where you've got really the project you want to do, as opposed to a project that you think, well, let's just do this so we got one. No, I corrected my head. Oh, okay. Mr. Grant. Yeah.
Okay, forgive me if they've already answered that, but if our club has $1,000 available to it, we would have to match it with $1,000?
That's correct.
Okay, but we could put up 2,000 and get your one and have a free.
That is correct. And we'd love you to do that. What happens when they use it up? If they don't use it, okay. So if they don't use it, I'm not gonna go roll back through if it's possible, but what happens if the back goes in the pot again? And it is still available. You can still reach it. It's just that it requires a little bit more paperwork to reach it. That makes sense.
In future years.
Yeah, you can use it in future years. Okay, so district grants, reference again, over your. This covers the district grants. Types of activities would be club project, scholarships, vocational training teams, international service project. There's a difference when you get to scholarships with regard to district grant. And John, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as I've read and kind of dug into this, scholarships here, are like the scholarships that we might give for, folks going to Kilgore College, or folks going to UT Tyler, other scholarships to local institutions. Global grant scholarships, which are also there, deal with graduate studies for 1 to 4 years. So if you've read about it, there's kind of a little bit of a dichotomy. If you want to do one or the other, or participate in one or the other, get in touch with us. And I know specifically that Lee Montgomery has worked with that, with some kids that went over to Australia on that. So vocational training teams are also covered under this international service project. The bulk of this, we're really gonna be dealing with on a daily basis for club project grants. And it's really for us to reach out to our community and communities where we have other Rotary clubs, where we've reached out and we're going together with them, as on the fence with the school in Mexico. Clubs again have to be qualified to apply, and it needs to be within the areas of focus. And it needs to include active participation in Rotarians if you're reaching out to other clubs. You know, and it's helpful also when you're turning in that CPG at the end to have pictures of your Rotarians actively involved in work. Yeah. Everybody hear Mike's comment on that, using some part of CPG to pay for wireless students?
Now, I get a lot of pushback from clubs saying we can't afford to send them because of the cost.
But you can afford to partner with the foundation to send it. So when to apply? And this is a question that came in. For this year, beginning July 1, there's a June 1 deadline. June 1st through 15th, District Grant Committee is going to review them. And then the approved CBGs are funded in mid to late July. This last year was an anomaly. We had some shakeup that occurred. As a result of that, it took a while to get in the closing CPGs. They can't be funded by RI until all that's in. We didn't get the last one in, I think, until late November. And then everything finally got funded. So the earlier we can get everything from y'all, the earlier we can disperse funds to y'all. Because we don't want y'all to feel like we're trying to play the gatekeeper and drag our feet on it. What's easy to overlook here in this process is when the project is completed and you know it's completed, get that final report in. It's due within a month of its completion. And if it's an ongoing project that's going to take pretty much most of the year, we need an interim report in January.
I want to say one more thing toward what Roy was saying about Lila. Before you do that, go through all the paperwork on that, talk to the RILA camp coordinator, because there's a limit on how many each club can send. And if you send in a bunch of, you get a bunch of money for more than we have room for, you still can't take it. So double check and make sure that what you've been sending is probably fine. If you're thinking, oh, this is a great time where we can send twice as many, probably need to talk to our camp coordinator.
And again, to be completed on before May the 1st, so that we've got all that by June 1st.
Beginning at the end of the year, we designated to buy in next first for the next.
What I do is I break it down into small steps, where the funds that you know you want to spend this year, you apply for this year, and then next year again. So reporting requirements, we talked about the interim report, final report, and again, photographs, media coverage, actual expenditures against the budget, receipt, accounting of all expenditure of grant funds. Unused funds need to be returned to the district. Reports and supporting documentation of club projects and club project grants need to be retained for up to 7 years after project completion. Now, consequences of failure: if you don't follow what you're supposed to follow, you don't get to do it. And it can also necessitate repayment of all funds received. Documentation on district grant, on the club project grant, would include, and we've talked about the bank account, the copies, the change in payee signatures, general ledger, grant application documents, reports from sponsoring clubs, copies received. Any questions on that? Recommendation is to use Microsoft Word to complete the docs with doc forms. Sometimes you don't have the PDF forms available, and especially the software to change the PDF form. But all of that is easily done if you do it within the confines of club limit. And again, on the club project grant, the application form, and to your question, don't present an entire project if only part of it's gonna be within 1 year. Describe the work that's gonna be within the 1 year, make sure dollar amounts are on budget, and attach the appropriate documentation. If y'all have any questions, we scroll through this again. I'm trying to keep us online so we can get in line for lunch. Important thing here, should be in red. The budget column on the budget should be identical to that on the original application. We're gonna look at that, and if we miss it for some reason, believe me, at RI, they will catch it and they will toss it back to us and say, wait a minute, what about this? No, please make sure that all the numbers match. Now we're to global grant. Remember, on global grants, we're talking, 15,000 in club money, 15,000 of RI money, for 30,000 or above global grant. We're supporting communities in Rotary countries, and a lot of this you'll hear about from Ken Huffine, perhaps this afternoon, on some opportunities that have come up in Mexico with Heart to Heart. We heard about them pretty much on a regular basis from Carol Greenwald with regard to things that are coming up in Guatemala. Those things are still out there. There are some things out there also in South Africa that I've seen that have come up recently, or other areas that y'all may know about. Just because we haven't or mentioned it doesn't mean it's not something that we couldn't use and wouldn't be happy to help. Remember, they've got to be sustainable. They've got to fit within a one or more of our areas of focus. You've got to be able to measure, and they've got to be community driven. You've got to have buy-in from the folks that you're talking to. Be sponsored by at least 2 Rotary clubs. And the issue there that we deal with a lot is we're generally pretty prompt at getting the paperwork in, and we've got it, but there are a number of them that we carry on the books that have not yet been closed because of the respondent club in a different country. So make sure if you've got that club that you have a firm understanding with them that they're going to be working it the same way we're working. Yes, sir. Just to be clear, you can use club project grants as though it were a global grant, or you and several other clubs can get together and go into a global grant reaching out to. Now, here we're talking again about the graduate level coursework or research for 1 to 4 academic years, supporting vocational training teams, travel for up to 2 individuals. Understand travel, by the way, is also covered. You need to document. You need to show it's not a vacation, but you're really going down to check and make sure what's going on, that the water plant is being installed as it was supposed to. And also the last line here is an important issue. Be sure to include up to 10% of the project budget for a project manager, and then the funding requirement for 30,000. Administration requirement. Sponsoring clubs responsible for supervising, managing, reporting, documenting, and it says retain it for a minimum of 5 years. I think that's now 7. Grant acceptance on global grants is on a rolling basis throughout the year. So if you find something, let's get together and talk about it. And grant scholarships are January 1 to April. Our district is proud to say that we have at least one $30,000 GSG going through each Rotary year, global scholarship grant. Again, the information reference to video found and scholar applications on this if you have a scholar who is interested. Those need to be received April 1. Committee then meets between April 1 and April 15. The selected scholar at the sponsor club go online, complete that application. After the application is complete, the Global Scholarship Grants Chair reviews it and submits it to the foundation. Keep it within an area of interest, and the areas of interest are shown. Questions on this part? Important, because the candidate, if they're going, and Australia didn't count. But if they're going to Mexico, or if they're going to France, or if they're going to Guatemala, they need to be conversant, or Germany, they need to be conversant in the local.
My nephew went to England and it was amazing for him. Well, it was my niece's husband. He wasn't actually that. Yeah, it was an amazing experience, but he knew English, that worked. Yeah.
Senior, yeah.
No,
This is not,
no, this is when my nephew-in-law, as you talk, he was at A&M his junior year and went over and did a year at the law school in England. No, he was good. You know what he did have trouble with? It was so cold. They had to send him a better coat. What we call a coat here, they don't work there.
couple more items. They've got to travel abroad for this, can't do it on Zoom. They need to live in, if we're the host, they need to live in our host district. And they actually need to know what they want to study and what we're really after on this is we're after establishing a network. Think about, peace that we, talk a lot about. We want to be able to have people in other countries we can reach out to. And if we have sent one of our folks over there to go, they're going to be interacting with those people. And they can be folks who can reach out to them, hopefully, making this a little bit more united and peaceful world. Questions on global grant? Well, I promised to get y'all out a little bit early, and I did. And you all are now certified, and you were probably certifiable before. It was a pleasure to visit with you today. Any last questions? If not, yes.
Most importantly, in the next 2 weeks, if your club has a club project plan for this year, you've got to get that final report in by June 1st. If you want to do a club project plan next year, that application needs to be in by June 1st. Either of those don't show up by June 1st, you won't be able to have any CPC next year. I mean, 1 year, trying to get this thing back on a year track. One. If your club has had a CPG at any time in the past, many of those documents, like the bylaws, the constitution, and other things that are required, you already have those. You may not know it, but they had to have submitted those before they could even apply for a club project grant in the past. If you've updated some of those documents, those need to be updated with the district. But a lot of that has already been done for you. The key ingredients are that memorandum of understanding, signed, dated, and also the application. And two of them together at the same time, to the district and work. Send them to the Rotary 5830, 5830 at Gmail. Not sending them to a particular person anymore, because that meant we had to have any forms every year. Too much trouble. So we forwarded to former chair of the district grant committee. The forms were all on that page I showed you earlier. You download them to doc files, fill out the doc file, and or if you want to do a pencil, You can only print the doc file in PDF format. You don't have to have Adobe or something else to get it from that.
John, boy, y'all asked, I printed one, the website in Loveland, and it's up here if y'all want to take a look at it. And if one person wants it more than everybody else, they're welcome to it. I'm sorry, how they,
Incoming club president, incoming foundation. That, those three, the incoming, the reason the president is on there, because he signed his taxes